I'm Weston Blealock, president of the Historical Society of Woodstock. Tonight's event is Woodstock Art Colony Kids. Our moderator, Bruce Weber, is an art historian and a trustee of the Historical Society. He will be speaking with Barbara Carlson, Meed Barnett, and Sarah Mecklem. Bruce?
And welcome to the program, Woodstock Art Colony Kids. Again, with Meed Wetterau Barnett, Barbara Carlson, and Sarah Mecklem, all of whom grew up in Woodstock's art colony in the period after World War II. They will touch on their experiences coming of age in this unique community, their artistic families, and the impact of growing up in Woodstock among a thriving community of artists that's had on their lives. It's a special pleasure to welcome Meed, Barbara, and Sarah, who have had the pleasure of getting to know over the past few years. Last summer, my wife Joanne and I visited Meed at her home in Canada, and just this January, we spent several days with Barbara in Austin, Texas. In Woodstock, Sarah has been a continual source of conversation, information about life and activity in the art colony and good cheer. I always say that working on the historic art colony is working on a living history, as many friends, associates, family members, and others continue or remain tied to the area. I'm going to briefly introduce Barbara and then Meed and Sarah. Each of them will talk alone about some of their Woodstock experiences. On the screen, you'll see an image featuring a small group of photographs relating to their lives here. This will be followed by an open discussion between them and also including myself. And after this, there will be a question and answer period. So please post questions in the chat and I'll look for them and announce them following the group conversation. And now I guess I should share my screen. So some of you have seen this. This was in our advertising for the event. And I'm going to go to the next image. Barbara Carlson is the granddaughter of John F. Carlson, landscape painter and author of The Elementary Principles of Landscape Painting, and of Margaret Goddard Carlson, also a noted landscape painter. Many of her other family members were involved in the visual arts and music, including her uncle, Broadway performer and singer Richard Eric Carlson. She believes that the wide, deep, and constant exposure to the arts that growing up in Woodstock provided was unique. Barbara, you want to talk for a few minutes?
Sure. Hello, everybody. Glad to see you, although I really can't see you.
Take your screen down, Bruce.
What's that?
Take your screen down, or no?
Can we leave it up? Can people see Barbara?
Yeah, I
Okay,
can't.
now I see Meed page.
Okay. I can't admit people. That's the problem.
They're asking me. I can do it. I can do it.
No, I see Meed's page right now.
Oh, great.
Oh, there's that drawing.
Here.
Stop. Okay. You moved the photograph on the bottom line a little bit. It needs to push over to the right because it's.
Yeah, I don't know if I can do that now. It's juggling.
All right, never mind. It's not important. Not important. Oh, here we go. Well, I'm glad to be here. And I wanted to say that, Bruce, thank you so much for conceiving of this idea. I will tell everybody that Bruce and I connected a couple of years ago, and he found out that I knew my way around the village and the area, the land of, the Woodstock Valley. And he had questions about different artists for his blog. So he wanted to track down information on the physical land. And he found out that I was a good, trail guide for that. So we tramped up and down and all around and in and out of roads and hills and culverts just about. And all the while we were talking. So that's how I came to know him. And it really relates to the way I grew up in Woodstock, which was, as kids do, tramping around in the woods all the time. I'm sure that's true for many of people who are here listening. When Bruce said he wanted to have a Woodstock Art Colony Kids conversation, I thought to myself, I had a lot of friends, but that I played with, but were they artist children? I really didn't click on that idea at all. I thought to myself, really the binding theme of what Woodstock has been for me doesn't have to do with the people I played with, but the atmosphere of their families and my family, and the smell of turpentine and linseed oil constantly in my nostrils, which is still one of my favorite flavors. So I spent time, of course, with the two people who were close by, physically close by. And that, of course, included people on Bird Cliff, because our house was right at the foot of Bird Cliff, across Glasgow Turnpike, on the south side of Glasgow Turnpike, but right on, close to Bird Cliff. So that meant that I spent time with the Websters, and one of the grown-ups in that family, Anita Stallforth, was my godmother. So I was in and about that. Yeah, you can see that on the map. Carlson, and then right opposite the Carlson house is a little road that goes up to Bird Cliff. So the Websters, of course, my uncle and aunt lived next door to our house, which doesn't show up on this map. My uncle and aunt, Bruce just mentioned his name as Richard Carlson. Really, it's Robert Eric Carlson. Lots of people knew him as Brown, and that's a whole nother story. But then across the road were the Petershams, who had a great influence, not only Maudie and Mishka, who were the artists who produced all those wonderful children's books, but their granddaughter Mary was my great partner in crime when we got together when she was in town. She didn't live in Woodstock, but she came often in the summertime. So we had grand times. And then if you move down Glasgow towards the east, I knew Meed Wetterau, Meed's grandmother, and Meed's brother Mark, with whom we went to, we all went to nursery school together. So those were the people that I saw. Of course, people on the school bus and so forth. And that's who we hang out with. The people who are close by. I think that's always the case. The world of art and music and writing and sculpting, that was just in the atmosphere, in the air we breathed and the water we drank. It was all around. You didn't, as a child, you don't know anything different. You just think, oh, well, this is the way the world is. And I thought that was the way the world was. And, later you find out not so much. But it was definitely with my great aunts and my grandmother, who had time, on their hands, because they were not trying to raise us. They were the elders, and they took a lot of time and trouble to introduce us and involve us with pottery and, singing and little theater productions that we put on. I think my cousin Jeannie is listening to this, and Jeannie, you'll corroborate that. And maybe your sister Suzanne is here as well. I don't know, but we all took a lot from our great aunts, that Harriet and Elsie Goddard. You see them here in this photographs. You see them on the far left as three little tiny girls, my grandmother and the two great aunts. And then on the lower right is Harriet and Elsie, our Harriet and Elsie Goddard, when they're older, mature. And then my grandfather, that's a picture of him when he's pretty old. He died in 45. So that picture on the upper left is 3 years before he died. there I am at the library fair. We all know the library fair. We all love the library fair. I'm very dressed up there, but I look completely confused, which, people are confused when they're 5 at the library fair, but thrilled to be there. And then on the right, you see me and my brother David, who, rest in peace, David just left us recently, and my next sister Elizabeth, who lives in Wales now, so she's not actually on this Zoom because it's the wrong time of day for her. But we did lots of land clearing. So, my father and my uncles were very much working the land all the time, clearing land, building stone walls, making firewood piles, and teaching us how to use tools by example. I'm sure I'm already over limit talking, so I should turn it over to Meed, I think is the next person.
Thank you, Barbara. Meed Wetterau Barnett is the grandchild of illustrator and landscape painter Rudolph Wetterau and portrait painter Margaret Wetterau. Meed was born in Greenwich Village and lived there until they were almost 5 when the family broke up. They lived in and near Woodstock until they left at the age of 18. They have deep visual memories of both late 40s Greenwich Village and 50s and 60s Woodstock. Meed has followed the family tradition as an artist, writer, and singer. Meed, I'll put the image up.
Hello, everybody. I am also very happy to be here and very thankful for this idea being conceived. I think it's wonderful. Before I say anything else, I also want to say that there are a lot of other wonderful Woodstock kids out there who are like us, and you must talk with them. They have wonderful stories to tell. We all have interesting and different ones, so don't forget to think about that. I would like to start. This is a little bit like somebody coming up to you and saying, "Tell me everything you know right now. 5 minutes, go." There is so much, and it's so rich that just to focus a little bit, I'm going to start by reading the first 2 sentences of one of my favorite books about Woodstock and a Woodstock artist. The first 2 sentences of Night Studio by Musa Gustin Mayer. She begins, "The summer my father died, I wanted to go home. Not to my real home in Ohio, where my life and work and family were, but home to Woodstock, home to my childhood." And that is so important. I think that just about everybody who has grown up, especially in the art colony days of Woodstock, will always call it home. When people here in Canada say, "Oh, where are you from?" and I say, "Woodstock, New York," and they say, "Oh, did you go?" And I say, "No." I want to concentrate on these very early memories of Woodstock because they are the foundation of everything I do today. Woodstock, I live in the visual. My life is not so much about people as about places and scenes and paintings I remember and all that sort of thing. You'll look at the picture of me on the very right. I'm leaning against a phone pole that's right outside of what was once the Nook and then later became the Cafe Espresso. And you'll see that I haven't changed much. The hair is just a different color, but I haven't changed much. Growing up in Woodstock was kind of tough for me. If you are a different person in some ways, I am different in that I was queer. And I was also very interested in mechanical kinds of things, not the fashionable girly type of things. I didn't want dresses and dolls and playing house. I wanted tools. I wanted to build things. I wanted to play with erector sets. Those were my joys in life. And I also wanted to draw. The person who was absolutely crucial to everything I ever became was my grandfather, Rudolph Wetterau, whom I knew as Wet, and everybody knew as Wet. And they knew my father as Little Wet, which he hated. He would be furious. Big Wet and Little Wet. He hated that. Anyway, Wet was my mentor. He was my friend. He was my guide. And he was the person who accepted me for everything that I was. He was just lovely. And he was also the best art teacher I ever had anywhere, with the possible exception being, and standing beside him, the wonderful courses I took from Manuel Bromberg.
I hope that Tina's here.
Those two things were just wonderful. But Wet would teach me by, not by being pedantic, not by saying, this is how you do something, but by asking me questions and then infuriating me by not giving me the answers. He wanted to teach me to see and to think like an artist. And he did that. Many of the lessons that he taught me, I have carried on and used with my own students. And I was just talking with some people who have kids who were my students, and they're saying that they are still drawing and still talking about some of the things that I shared that came straight from Wet's studio, really. I'll give you one brief example. One time I was doing a picture puzzle. I like them. They're mental chewing gum for visual people. They're not silly. They're really kind of a good exercise. It's like push-ups. I was doing this puzzle, and it was a picture of a cabin in the woods in the moonlight with a rowboat frozen into a river and so on. And Wet came by and I said, "Isn't this beautiful?" And he looked at it and he said, "No." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "I won't tell you." And he went back into his studio to draw. Took me a couple of years to figure it out, but in fact, it was one of the most maudlin, awful, poorly composed pictures that ever happened. But he left me to figure that out, which is so great. The other pictures that you see there are, at the very top left is my grandmother Marg and my father at about age 18 or so, 17 or 18. And I'm not sure where they're standing, someplace in Woodstock, but I'm not sure where they are. The picture next to it on top are Marg and Wet with my father, and they've set out on cross-country skis, and they're on the Glasgow Turnpike. That is how the Glasgow Turnpike looked all the way up to when I was a kid. All the roads in Woodstock, there weren't any fog lines, there weren't any big black pavement and all that stuff. They were one step above dirt. And in the summer, they poured tar on it, on the roads, so to keep the dust down. And it got black and sticky, and you got scolded for getting it all over your shoes. The picture below is the front of our house. That my grandfather Wet built that house. And that is the house that was later bought. It's on Glasgow Turnpike, and it was later bought by Kevin and Linda Sweeney. And there are 4 people in that picture. And the person on the far left is Henry Matson, who was one of Wet's very best friends. Henry Matson and Eugene Spiker were 2 of Wet's very best friends. And he would come around very often. And he came around on that day to see what they were doing. And sometimes his cat would get lost, and he'd come around, and he spoke in a strong Swedish accent. And he would come around and say, "Have you seen my critter?" we'd wonder. He also, my grandfather taught me how to paint. He taught me to paint in a practical way, not just as an artist making paintings, but also how to apply paint practically, as if in painting houses or painting an object. And I painted a pair of stilts in this crazy color that we concocted from everything that was left on the far side of the cabinet stirred together. And we painted these stilts, and they got dry, and I went out on them on Glasgow Turnpike. And I chanced past Henry Matson, who looked at me and he said, "You must be very careful. That is very dangerous." Well, that was long ago. That's when I was little. The picture in the middle is me, on the bottom there is me at my other grandparents' house in Shady. My other grandparents were the Moncures, Ethel and William Moncure, whom we knew affectionately as Mugger and Dee Dee. And all of us knew, well, called them that too. And those were their two cats. And they were the most friendly Siamese cats that ever were. And I loved them dearly. So what Barbara said about growing up in houses full of paint, I still can smell damp plaster and fireplace ashes and linseed oil. It's in my brain. It's somewhere down in my deep conscious. I smell it a few minutes before I fall asleep. Also, I would go to other children's houses sometimes, as Barbara was talking about. And the first thing I would say is, "Hey, where are your paints?" And they would say, "Where are my what? Don't you have any paints?" You know, what kind of house is this? So it was a very special little enclave of people who were very dedicated to visual arts and a life that is enmeshed in visual art. And that's how I grew up. I wandered, I didn't look at people, I never did any homework in my life. I almost got left back a grade in school because I didn't do any work. There was this big discussion in Walter Van Wagenen's office at Woodstock School. And I was listening to it all. And finally, at the end of it, Walter Van Wagenen looked at me and said, "And what do you think?" And I looked out the window of the office and I said, "Isn't the mountain beautiful today?" Hopeless. I'm just lost in the visual world, always will be. Well, I've gone on long enough. I could go on forever. Millions of memories. It's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful way to grow up. And I am now hard at work on a book of memories. I don't know how well anybody can see this, but it's just a book of memories that is illustrated that I'm going to give to my kid. It's something that they'll have. Oh, in the end, I have these two pictures that I have. This one on the left is a painting of that Wet made. I think that's Slide Mountain in the background. That is Route 28A as it looks.
Oh my goodness.
And it was all the poured macadam road and the old phone poles with telegraph wires. And I love this painting because I grew up looking at it. And that Jeep, such as the Jeeps that I'm sure Barbara Carlson well remembers, that Jeep was what people drove. It went through the snow, about the only thing that would in the days before the giant snowplows. And it always looked like you never got there, you know? And that's kind of like the exciting thing about life. You never get there. There's always a new hill. There's always a new place. And the picture on the right is my memory painting of the Woodstock Village Green on Christmas Eve.
Great.
We sang our carols to the holy stars. It was just so plain and so simple and lovely. And there are four people in that painting who are real people. Well, one of them is an animal. The dog is our famous dog, Daniel Boone, the foxhound, who was probably father of half the other little dogs in town. And the green snowsuited child is me. The one to the left is my kid brother, and the lady in the red hat and very, very special red boots is my grandmother, Moncure. So there we all are. That's Woodstock. That was my early Woodstock. Next person, I think.
Thanks so much, Meed. That was fantastic. Sarah, I will introduce you. See you for some reason, but I know you're here. If I can
I'm
move.
here.
Oh, okay.
Uh-oh.
Sarah Mecklem is the daughter of Austin Mecklem and Marion Appel, both noted landscape artists. She grew up in Woodstock with the children of many other local artists until moving to New York City at age 10. She went to art school, including at the Woodstock School of Art. Sarah Mecklem is herself a noted painter and sculptor who has exhibited widely, including at the Kleinart James Art Center in Woodstock. Hi, Sarah.
Hi. Well, it's this is just such a great opportunity, but like Barbara and Mead, I think of all the other children of artists who were wove in and out of our lives, and every time I ran into one recently when we were going to do this, I said, "Oh, you should be there too. Oh, you should be there too." I'd see Jenny Curry or somebody else, Mark Plate or somebody. My parents met, well, it's complicated. They lived the other thing I wanted to say was that I really can't even talk about my life in Woodstock without mentioning my sister, Pixie, who was 4 years older than me. And in a sense, I feel as though she got more time in Woodstock than I did. She grew up on the Maverick. She was born in the house that Meck had shared first with Hannah Small. And then when he married my mother, my mom moved in and they lived there with their outdoor shower and their pump for water and wood stove. And they had spent the first 6 months of their marriage traveling in Alaska, making paintings of mountains mostly, but they were trekking around. They were camping out and doing paintings for the WPA. And then they came back, and in that little tiny cottage, they made a mural, which then was sent overland back to Wrangell's post office in Wrangell, Alaska.
Oh my gosh.
And the rumor was, I think my mom said when Pixie was asleep and she was just a tiny baby, our dad would paint, and this was in the wintertime, and he would paint with his shirt off to keep track of the heat in the house. So when he felt he needed to put a shirt on, he knew it was time to stoke up the stove or get more wood in, and he wanted to make sure that it was warm enough for the baby. By the time I came along, they needed more space, and they got a house over on the Route 212 across from where now St. Gregory's Church stands, and also Arnold, Blanche, and Doris Lee lived across the road. Those were our kind of nearest neighbors. My dear friend, my first really good friend was Carolyn, or Polly Wilson, she was known as, but she uses the name Carolyn after her mother now. And she lived upstream from our house. She was on Chestnut Hill Road, and we used to rock hop to each other's houses, or just rock hop and spend hours and hours on the stream, just being in that environment. Later, then I went to Mary D. and Gretchen's nursery school. Now, did you go there, Barbara?
Yes, ma'am. I certainly
I
did.
think I have pictures of you. You were just a little bit younger than us. Polly was there, and there were so many kids who were there. Paul Champagne, Wendy Hyatt. Do you remember any of them?
Yes, I do. I do remember those people.
Lawrence Webster, Libby Jurist.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and who else?
Well, Mark Wetterau, I remember sitting, they had that tree lying down, and we
Yes.
would straddle a tree,
Yes.
and then the photograph would be taken.
Right, exactly. I have those photographs. And then who else? Craig and Jonathan Hubble were there too. Did you
They
know?
were, absolutely. Jonathan Hubble, yes.
I just want to interject that what they're talking about is a school that was run by the daughters of Judson Smith that was on Ohio Mountain Road where his property was.
Right, right. Yes.
Mary B. and Gretchen Smith.
And my understanding is that was one of the first Montessori schools in this country, and got quite a lot of recognition for that. I remember we baked bread and we polished candlesticks and did all kinds of hands-on things. Yeah, and then I would go home. And speaking about the atmosphere, I would go home and the first thing I would do is break out my pencils or paints, but it was mostly pencils. I loved feeling the different weight of hard leads and soft leads. And it was like a physical, visceral experience. And I just thought that's how everybody grew up. I thought
Yes.
everybody's family had a studio, everybody had turpentine, everybody, and it was kind of a tunnel vision. But at the same time, then I became fascinated with the kids who didn't have that. And I remember, I adored Marcia Underhill, who was the drum majorette.
Yes.
March and her family ran the dry cleaning business.
That's right.
And then there were the Maurer kids whose family ran the Maurer supermarket, which has gone through many, many different iterations of things. And it's interesting, that sort of dichotomy between those who are children of the creative environment and then children who are of a different kind of environment, but not, it just was interesting how anyway, I could go off and on. We did go to live in Buffalo for a while, for a year, when my parents were teaching at the Albright Knox School of Art there. That was in 1949, I believe. And then when we came back, my dad was quite ill, so and died within a year of our being back. And then Jenny Magafan had come back from so his death was a pretty powerful loss in my life as a little child, and it was a major change. And Jenny Magafan came back, and they lived up Plockman Lane. Eddie and Ed Chavez and Jenny lived, had their studio there, and Jenny died. And so it was like, this was suddenly the time of losing people that were precious in their lives. Jenny and her sister Ethel were some of my favorite people, some of the most powerful, dramatic, dynamic characters. And it wasn't until later in life that I learned how extraordinary their lives were as mural painters, young mural painters. By the time they were in their 20s, they had already done quite a number of murals all across the country. I think they only came to this country, to this part of the country, in the early 40s, maybe. And then my mom was holding the fort together by herself with two young girls and trying to make a living as an artist. By the time I was 8, she was having too hard a time and moved to New York. And my sister and I went to stay at the Peter Pan farm, which is where I met. Well, I knew Meed before, but I think that was where we shared a room for 2. I don't know if you were there for the whole time that I was there, but we shared a room for 2 years. And I can attest to Meed's incredible ability to make things.
Let me just interject. That's the site now, the Woodstock Day School.
Day School, right, exactly.
Xena Road.
Yeah. And the Voss family is a whole other history to this era. They came after the war with a quite extraordinary history from their time during the war, and set up this place which provided an incredible haven for youngsters with whose families were going through difficulty. But anyway, Meed and I shared a room, and I just remember, Meed, you made these most intricate horse bridles out of wire and string, and you would braid, and you would make every kind of snaffle bit and I learned everything I know about horse bridles from you. But you would make them for us to wear. And so
Yes.
we should be wearing them. And it was just, it was just an extraordinary exposure to a kind of creativity that, you don't always come across. So I have great memories of that. We were sometimes a whole table of like 18 kids around the table, I remember, and Mr. and Mrs. Voss presiding over the table with their homemade atomic energy bread we made with a lot of molasses, which we really loved. It was black bread, and we had porridge that sometimes was scorched. If we were lucky, it wasn't. And there were it was a very big shift, but very, very interesting learning about a different culture and way of living, and the impact that the war had had on the Voss family. They were very not parsimonious, but very frugal, I guess, really, about the kinds of things we ate. It was not a luxurious kind of a living there. But we had the animals, and we had homemade yogurt, which I'd never had before, and molasses on things, and tea that became almost like liquor by the time the end of the day. It was sitting on the stove all day long, cooking down. And then, and other memories that I have, which are time between my dad's death, there was a lot of kind of, the social life was amazing. I remember being at parties with wild grown-ups. I mean, there's so many of them. I remember standing in the back of our Model T, I think, I don't know, maybe it was a Chevy, an old Chevy, watching Herman Cherry and Fletcher Martin swinging fists at each other.
Mm.
And then I remember diving contests in the Penning swimming pool, or maybe it was at Harvey Fite's place. My mom and Marianne and Harvey would compete as divers and swimmers. They were both swimmers. I mean, I have lists and lists of people. The picture in the middle of me, also, just for the record, people knew me as Sally back then.
Exactly.
They didn't know me as Sarah, just as Mead had another name in the old days.
Mhm.
But the picture in the middle was a very spontaneous painting with mud that Julio Diego did on me at some event. And the birthday up in the corner has a lot of people that we know. From the left, you can see Olivia or Tinker Twine with her full skirt at the table, and my sister's. Oh,
Sorry.
that's okay.
Oh.
There it goes.
Oh.
There it is. I don't know if other
Mind of its own.
here it is, yeah. In the middle is me. I was turning 7. Right, let's see, the person in the shorts and the white shirt is my sister, Pixie. And then there's Sherry Herbert and Wendy Hyatt and her mother, Virginia Hyatt. And then there's Alec Refugee sitting on top of the ladder. I'm not sure who's next to him, but his mother is in the doorway. And his sister, Bridget, is having her hair braided by Gloria Diaz, who was the mother of the Ramirez twins, who were the founders of the Ballet Hispanico in New York. So that was, I think, a kind of typical birthday. I mean, I think people just had these, but they were all adults. I found the adults were just as interesting as the kids.
Absolutely.
I
Big point.
remember I adored Marion Greenwood. She was one of the most, she along with Ethel and Jenny Magafan were amongst the most beautiful, dramatic looking women I'd ever met. And also Gladys Plate. This is another one. And what else? Oh, I know the other thing that I remember was that during that time, I mean, a lot of stuff happened in a very short amount of time. My mother was working for Anton Refugee on his murals. She would go to his studio, and often Pixie and I would go and play with Toto and Alec and Bridget while Mom was working on the mural. Or sometimes Ref would be drawing us. And that was just the norm, just go and be somewhere like that. And where else? I was thinking, I remember also watching Carolyn Haberlin making silk screens in her little studio inside the house, and she would be pulling images of cats and of domestic scenes. And the process was just part of what imbued my childhood experience. Over here on the below the on the right is my sister and my mom hanging out with Muse Augustine at some event. I don't know. I have this feeling it was at the Joneses. And then on the far left is little Wendy Jones in his mom Jane's arms, who was a good buddy of all of ours. And then my sister Pixie and my mom. And above is a picture of my dad and my mom and me and my sister and my cousins for having a Thanksgiving, or else it was a Christmas dinner. But anyway, so then what happened was, after 2 years living with the Voss family, we moved to New York, and I vowed I would come back to Woodstock. And it took about 50 years, but I did. So I don't know if I've gone over time or what, but here we are. I think we're ready for the next step.
Great. That was great. I mean, I know you guys could just keep talking, but let me just pull up this drawing, because we all met a couple of weeks ago to have a sort of pre-Zoom, and I showed this drawing, and it sort of just opens up a discussion, because the three of you could almost identify everybody in this drawing.
Mhm.
I think Meed and Sarah, I keep wanting to call you Sally.
It's okay.
Which was, by the way, my mother's name, so it comes easily to the lips. But you two were really, I mean, especially Meed, I think, really could just go right through this lineup and say everybody's name.
I have a whole list of names that I keep thinking of. Is this Meed, you'll have to tell me, but you've got to unmute yourself.
You need your
Yeah. Because I think you were the one who knew people.
I know quite a few of them. Yep.
Is that Bruce Curry in the middle, or Fletcher Martin?
Looks like Fletcher.
arrow here.
Ray Martin, I think that's Fletcher Martin.
Okay. Okay. And then that's not Herman Cherry on the left, is it?
No, that I believe is Louis Arlt.
Oh, this? No.
Everybody, it's probably good if you kind of try to say where you're referring to, because people won't. That's Herman Cherry, you think, right?
What's the Axel?
Yeah.
Woodsy, of course.
The far left is Clem Nessel.
Yes.
And I don't know who that next person is, but the next one after that is Mutzi.
The other day, Meed, you knew who that middle person was the other day.
Yeah, that middle one.
Who's
Oh.
the little one with the bangs? Who's the woman with the bangs in the back?
Oh boy, that one I'm not sure of.
You knew the other day.
I thought I knew who that was, but it might be, oh, what the heck? What was that person's
We
name?
might be drilling down into an ant's nest if we try to identify everybody here.
Sure, how about to the right, the man to the right?
Is that Feeney
Which one now?
with the glasses and the sort of blondish hair in the suit coat? Holding a piece of paper?
You mean Paul Feeney?
No, Ernest or Paul?
Yeah, well, Ernest didn't live in the colony in these years.
Right.
Not sure exactly. I forget the year that this thing moves.
It
Uh,
might-
Marty B. Matson?
No, it's not Henry. No.
How about Yasu Kuniyashi?
Well, Kuniyoshi's right here. If we go, when I put my arrow, can people see my arrow?
Yes, I
Yes.
can see
That's
your.
Kuniyashi.
That's Kuniyoshi right here.
Yep.
Mhm.
And
So-
behind him, right behind him to the left with the little cap is Jerry Jerominick.
That's right, Mead, you said that the other day.
Can you talk a little bit about Jerry Geronimic?
Oh,
He was a
was-
printer. Mhm.
he was what?
He did printing.
He was a printer, yes.
Yeah, he did a lot of
with
silk screen.
Patra prints, and he was an item with Rosemary Bear. And
Uh-huh.
Gay Bear was a great friend of ours, the
Oh,
kid.
that's right.
And
Yeah.
he did a lot of the programs for the Woodstock Playhouse.
Yes, he did. Yeah.
That's right.
Those and other events, I think, if there were fundraising events and so on, he would do the silk screen brochures and so on. They were quite wonderful.
Year after year in Woodstock, they used to have contests for Christmas outdoor decorating. And it wasn't like what you think of today with see how many lights, how high an electric bill you can run up, whatever, plastic reindeer or whatever. No, it was really beautiful, handmade, beautiful Christmas things. And Jerry would win year after year with this amazing hand-carved wooden angel that was backlit.
Oh, yes, I remember that.
Like
On
something,
top of the guild? Is that the one that was on top of the guild every year?
it wasn't at the guild, it was at the house that I think the Jeffreys owned. It was the last place my mother lived before she died. And it's where Jerry lived. It had a flat porch roof, and that's where he put it up. And he would win every year. Nobody could top that thing. It was backlit in such a way that the light from the lighting made a kind of a halo. It was gorgeous.
I wonder if there's ever a photograph of that any place. We
I
should
do too.
dig up.
Where was the Jeffries house?
70, the address now would be 7070 Tinker Street.
Well,
Is it
it's,
down where
it's a
there,
put-
where Apple Rock is?
yes,
Yeah, that's a little bit too far though.
well, but that's close by.
Yeah, near.
There's only one house up on that Meadow Hill. And that was, I think, and that was the Jeffries house. David Jeffries was my contemporary, same grade and everything.
Yeah, Mark was good friends with him.
Yes, that's right.
Built together quite a bit. He was a master.
Let me throw this out because I've been asking everybody for this, and then we can go back to this image. If anybody who's listening has any photographs of the swimming hole parties and the swimming that went on at Apple Rock, send them to me or let me know through the Historical Society, because nobody's been able to find any. And it was a great place for people to go swimming.
Yep.
Going back to, do you think that the man next to it, could that be Arnold Blanche?
I think it is.
Could be, you're right. And is
Looks
that
like-
Doris Lee next to him with the hat?
Doris Lee next to him, right, to the left. And then the woman here with the dog
I don't know who that is.
or a child? Could be a child.
Might be a kid. I don't know who that is. No.
And she's wearing glasses, it looks like.
I see Becky Phelps.
Where's that?
There's a woman in a great big full skirt with designs on it and a shawl.
Right.
To the left of her, I believe that is Becky
Oh,
Phelps.
right here.
No, wrong full skirt, all the way to the right. Her,
Here. And who is she?
I'm not sure who she is, but the woman next to her in the white shirt with the black hair and glasses, that's Becky Phelps.
Oh, and who is Becky Schultz? I mean,
Becky Phelps, Phelps, I believe it's spelled. She was part of she was in the Maverick crowd, really, so I didn't know her well.
Okay.
But she hung out with the Gustins and
There was Robert Phelps,
yeah,
who was a writer,
yeah.
and he was married to an artist, a painter.
Mhm.
And I wonder
And
if
there
that,
was a boy, does anybody remember Roger Phelps?
Roger Phelps, absolutely. He was part of the famous Boy Scout, Cub Scout troop that Marg ran. She was the best Cub Scout leader that it ever was.
He was the best puppeteer that I ever saw in my life.
Hey, I learned that art too. I conducted a full-length puppet show at the school my kid went to. We did the James Thurber's 13 Clocks, the whole story in puppets. It was wonderful fun.
Marg Wetterau had a wonderful wingspan. She just had all these interests and all these ways of expressing them that were so appealing to children and adults and everybody in between.
right, and she was very involved with the guild,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and she gave classes there too, quite a few, right?
Yes.
In the
Yes.
basement, the children's classes in what is now referred to as the Tinker Room, which is the basement of the guild.
Hmm.
We did all summer vacation before I got old enough to ship off to camp. We used to have these wonderful classes where we made puppets and ended the year with a full-length show.
Yes.
And she didn't fool around. We did excerpts from Shakespeare and from children's literature. It wasn't just silly stuff. It was really, really, we had tales. She loved the classics. Marg loved the classics. And we did a lot of those. We did a Persephone play one time.
She was a beloved friend of all of our family, particularly the aunts and my grandmother. I mean, that was the same generation. But yeah, she was just in every conversation. Marg Wetterau this, Marg Wetterau that.
Yeah, I wanted to tell you a story about when we were talking about the Vosses. First of all, Sarah, all that stuff that we made out of the bridles and all that stuff we used to make, boy, did that give me the best training in the world to become a darn good jeweler.
I'll bet. I
But
can
I
imagine.
did.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, we
Our
got the
house is
Vosses.
also full of contraptions.
Uh-huh. Mhm.
I wanted to tell you about a time in Woodstock that I think Sarah was there when this happened. One day we came home from school and there was this boy there who was this angular, gawky, unlovely boy who was not friendly.
Was this at Peter Pan Farm?
Your Penn Farm, and we didn't know who he was and why he was there, but he was there, and he
This is a great story. I know what you're going to do.
yeah he
Yes.
one thing about this boy is that he loved the game of chess.
Oh, yes, I
He
remember.
taught every one of us how to play chess so that he could wipe every one of us off the board in about 4 moves. And he loved doing it too. And he would play chess day and night. We would sneak into his room and we'd see the blankets all huddled up with a flashlight underneath, and we'd pull the covers off and run like heck.
Mhm.
Anyway, this boy who taught me how to play chess was Bobby Fischer.
That is the most amazing thing I ever heard.
I still play. I'm not a great player. I'm a pretty decent player, but I'm not ranked or anything. But I
He's
He
can.
went on to become the world champion, was the champion of champions for so long across the whole globe, wasn't he?
He was.
I couldn't tell you what years and all that, but
Yeah.
he was just a god.
Household word. Mhm.
He
A
finally
a
did
chess
concede
god.
that women could play chess.
Yeah, I had forgotten that story. That's a great story.
It was amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
Should we open the floor to questions now? What do you think?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Just stop your share screen.
Okay, I will do that. Do I have to do anything else?
Oh, you're done. Fine.
Dixie, you used to have short hair.
Mhm.
I see Manel Montagne there.
Yeah, that's me. I
Oh.
remember Pixie with super short black hair.
Yeah, well, Pixie had, yeah, she had a pixie cut at one point.
Yeah.
I remember Bobby Fischer. Oh,
Yeah.
he was scary.
Wasn't he scary? Yeah, he was.
Stabbed somebody with a fork, you know, that
That's
was,
what he did. That's why one day we came home, we at supper one night, he picked up a fork. Dominic Voss said something to him that put
And
him
did
on.
he go after?
He picked up that fork and aimed for his eyes, man. He just threw that thing like that. And the next day he was gone.
Looking at one of the questions here. Can you see the questions now, or am I the only one who can see them?
I
Oh,
can't,
I can see questions.
Okay, I'm going through them. Trying to do it from the top. I see some people had problems getting in at the beginning. I hope Mead will say something about the pianist Robin Wetterau.
oh,
Rose was her uncle.
Yeah, my father's brother, Robin. I first encountered his music as a kid. He came over with my, I don't know, I was little, but it's some household where there was a piano, and he sat down and started playing. And I just was awestruck. I didn't know that hands could do that. He was playing a piece that he had written called Chelsea on Down. And he played in a kind of ragtime, somewhere between ragtime and Dixieland. It wasn't quite either one. It was his very own. And he had a band called the Dixieland Rhythm Kings. And later, and he had many others over the years. His very last band was the Jelly Roll Jazz Band. And then there were he also had the Jelly Roll Pups, where he was teaching kids to play jazz in his old age.
That's great.
But he was very energetic. Unfortunately, like so many people in Woodstock, so many people were really kind of stunted by the amount of alcohol that was being consumed. It's really a terrible shame. And it's one of the reasons I left. When I left, I didn't see a future for myself in any realistic sense by staying there. Most of the people I knew were into various drinking and drugs and what have you, and the men were not terribly responsible types. And I just, I didn't want to do it. So
Well, you were how old when you left Mead?
I was 18.
So that's the time of life when we take flight and we want to go and find out the bigger world and what's going on and who's who in the zoo, so to speak, out in the wide world.
I didn't get along with my family. I didn't get along at all. And one day, in fact, I said to my father, hey, in a year and change, I'm going to graduate from high school. And if things don't change an awful lot, I'm leaving here and I am never coming back. And he just said something cute like, oh, you're cute when you're angry, or something like that, some infuriating thing. And you know what? He found out I wasn't kidding. I traveled the world. I've had a great life. I gave myself a second adolescence when I left Woodstock. I hung around in folk bars. I sang folk music for years to earn money to go to college and stuff. I had a good time. I had a lot of fun. But yeah, I had to get away. And now the way Woodstock is now, I don't have anything to say really, except that it's a place I don't know anymore. I don't understand it.
Well, you have to come visit. I know you were going to come visit, and then COVID hit, and then you were going to try again, and then you got your citizenship in Canada right after we were there last August. So you have to come visit. We all have to go out and drink some soda pop and
Soda pop, that's what I drink. I get stoned on water. I get really wrecked on water, man. Water.
You came to visit me. You
I
visited
did.
me in the house that I'm in now, I think.
Yes, and you made me the best fried eggs I've ever eaten in my life.
Well, come and get some more. It would be lovely to
whoever's
see.
been coming to visit again
Yeah.
lately.
Mhm.
Of course, our sister's here, so.
We have passports now, so we can travel. For a while, we couldn't travel because of COVID, all the citizen celebrations are online and they make you cut up your permanent resident card. So you're kind of undocumented until you get your passport, and that took months. So we had to stay in Canada, we couldn't leave. But now we are equipped, we can come and go.
So are you a dual citizen
We
or?
are, yeah,
Mhm.
and I like it that way. I don't hate the USA, I just don't want to be there right now.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
I
come
get it.
visit, and I just wanted to close this evening's program and just offer my thanks to Sarah or Sally and Barbara for being here to do this. It was really great to hear all your stories, and it'll be recorded so people who maybe missed a little bit at the beginning or other people want to tune in can go to the website at the Historical Society and see the program. Again, thanks everybody for being here, and have a good night.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you so much,
so
Bruce.
much,
If
Bruce.
anybody thought this was a great idea, I hope it's done again with some more Woodstock kids. Wouldn't that be?
That's like everything else, you learn how to do it so we can do it more and interestingly and creatively in all kinds of directions.
Mhm.
If we keep going.
Great.
Fun to see you all.